treated child with an intellectual or developmental disability. So, trying to figure out if a child's been abused when they have an intellectual or developmental disability can be very difficult because with young children, you don't really notice those type of delays. And especially when we're dealing with children who aren't able to speak, it's going to be really tough to really understand what's going on with them. Um, we know that when children have intellectual and developmental delays or disabilities, there are challenges with them learning new skills. They may have a slower processing speed, and they can have difficulty understanding the outcomes of their own action. So, understanding how a child in your classroom processes information is important. Um, the child may have difficulty describing things. The child may describe everything in detail. The more you know the child, the more you can really assist them when things go wrong in their home lives. When we're thinking about children with intellectual or developmental disabilities, we have to look for indicators a lot more than we listen to what they have to say because they might not be able to get their point across. So we start to look for changes in their behavior, whether that be regression in skills or whether they start to hurt themselves. If they seem to be incredibly stressed around certain people who come near them, if they start to engage in inappropriate sexual behavior, or if they start to speak a lot more in angry tones, or they are suddenly regressing, they're not able to speak at all. So we have to understand that baseline. We have to know the kid enough to see that something has gone wrong, especially when you're dealing with profound disabilities. Now, it can be tough for kids because they might have a problem really understanding that they're upsetting people or that they're upset. So they might not really be able to express how they feel. But sometimes we can see that there are issues. The child may startle quickly. They may have problems picking things up. They may have problems suddenly with balance. And these can be concerns that might make us look a little bit further into what's going on. Now, we know that children with intellectual and developmental disabilities are prone to certain types of abuse. So, head trauma can be associated with excessive crying. Burns can be associated with toilet training because parents with children who have disabilities may not really understand that the children don't understand regular timeouts or being told to stop. So they may take extremes to try to get their children to listen. Um, we also want to make sure that these children are not being neglected. So we have to avoid blame, and we need to have ways to help support them as well. Now, sometimes we might see injuries, and that may be due to the disability itself. So we may see problems with them not understanding when things are hot. So they might get burns from a bath that's too hot because they can't express. They might not be feeling things if they're paralyzed from the waist down. They might not be able to feel pain in the same way. And we do see that in certain different chromosomal disorders. Um, so we know that as children become more mobile, and we discussed that earlier, there are more bruises. And it's usually where they fall down. Now, we need to really take a look and see and make sure that these bruises are from normal wear and tear of learning how to walk or being uncoordinated, or the different things that go into growing and the different things that go into some developmental issues that we may be seeing with these children. So here we have an easy way to identify a bruise is some bruises that could signal concerns. We use the phrase 10-4. So if there are problems on the torso, the ears, the neck, we know that that could be something that we're looking for abuse. Kids get pulled by the ear. Sometimes they get pulled by the neck. So these are things that we want to investigate further. And abusive burns can be associated with toilet training. So we really need to be aware of this when we're dealing with children with profound disabilities. There's another thing that we look at when we're dealing with children with disabilities, and that is changes in the way that they talk, changes in the nonverbal cues that they're using, and some difficulty in terms of how they're communicating with us. Um, so when this happens, we want to talk to the family. We want to offer support, but we also want to make sure the child's safe. So some things we might hear if a child's not safe is inconsistent explanations. So we see that bruise, it doesn't seem like it's consistent with what they're saying, or even just saying like, "Oh, they're fine," and just brushing off what we have to say. Getting really angry when the child isn't able to do what they think they should be able to do, and not having any family to help support them. All of these can be indicators that the parent is overwhelmed and the parent is reacting in an abusive way. So let's take a look at this scenario. Gemma is a sixth grader and she's a child who uses a brace to walk. Today, she is having a particularly hard time walking. When she sits down, she acts like it hurts. You ask her what's wrong, and she just looks down and says nothing. A few days later, she's playing a game with the other children, and she rolls up her pant leg, and you notice a dark purple bruise on her inner thigh. She seems to remember the bruises are there and rolls the pant leg back down below her knees. What do you do? Well, Gemma might have been the victim of sexual abuse. Pain or difficulty in walking is a warning sign of this type of abuse. So you do not question the child. It's a very sensitive topic when we're talking about sexual abuse. So you leave that to a trained counselor and investigators. Instead, you document what you've seen and you report your suspicions right away.